In this video, I want to give you an introduction to creative finance. In other words, how you can finance your next property deal using none of your own money. So my name is Simon Zutshi. I'm the author of Property Magic, the Amazon #1 property bestseller. I'm the founder of the Property Investors Network and 50 network meetings all over the country. And I've been investing in property for 25 years. And I've purchased a number of properties using none of my own money. And I've taught many of my students how to do this successfully as well. Now, it's important to say at the very beginning, we're not talking about doing anything dodgy or anything illegal. We want to make sure we do things properly and correctly, and we're just working creatively with motivated sellers. Now that's important. If you've got someone who's selling a property, most people just want to get it sold. They don't want to do anything creative. They want a nice simple transaction. However, if you find a motivated seller, what we talk about in Property Magic, motivated sellers, people who maybe have got a property problem, they need speed and certainty, those people might be more open to being creative. And it's interesting that when we see the market decline and there aren't that many buyers in the market, lots of people who still need to sell, not as many buyers become a bit more open to creative solutions. And they might consider things like vendor finance or purchase lease options or exchange with delayed completion, all of which I'll talk about in this video. But it's about being open to understand there are different ways rather than just having to do the traditional way of investing. The other thing I would say also is that a lot of people believe you can't do creative finance because maybe they haven't personally done it or they don't know people have done it. To build your belief and knowledge, it's great to look at case studies of other people who've actually done these kind of deals. And if they've done it, well, it means it's possible. And obviously you've got to make sure you do things correctly and legally, as we said before, but these deals are absolutely possible in the right circumstances. That's really important because they don't work all of the time. So let me give you some examples of different types of creative finance and give you a little bit of an introduction to them, so at least you can raise your awareness as to some of the possibilities. So the first thing I want to talk about is a purchase lease option. I've got lots of videos on YouTube all about purchase lease options. You might want to check out some of those. Fundamentally, it's where someone's got a property they're trying to sell. They don't want the property, want to get rid of the property for whatever reason. But interestingly, they don't necessarily need the money from the sale. They're not selling because they need to release the equity. They're selling because they just don't want the property. So we can approach those people and we say, look, we'd like to buy that property from you, not now, but sometime in the future. We agree a price today. And in the meantime, we look after that property. We babysit their mortgage if there's a mortgage, there may not be. We look after their mortgage payments for them. We look after the maintenance of the way. You take on full responsibility as if you bought the property, but you haven't actually bought it. The property stays in their name. If there's a mortgage that stays in their name, you need to make sure you get permission from the lender and the property is used in the correct way and it's insured properly. But this is a great way of you controlling that asset and potentially getting cash flow and equity growth from a property you don't own. So a purchase lease option is one of the creative finance strategies you can use. Now, there is some money required when you do an option. It can be literally as low as less than £1,000, but I would say on average, taking into account all the fees, you might be paying an estate agent their fees, you might be paying a sourcer a fee to find a deal for you. I'd say between £5,000 and £10,000 to do a purchase lease option. That's much better than having to put in the normal 25% deposit. And by the way, you can actually finance that. There's a company, as long as you have a property company, they will give you all the money to cover the costs. So again, it can be done no money down if you have the right knowledge and you have the right contacts. The next thing I want to talk about is an EDC, an exchange with delayed completion. Now, this is similar to an option, but there are a couple of key differences. First of all, when you exchange contracts, you are committing to buy that property and the seller has to sell to you. With an option, you've got the right to buy if you want to, but not the obligation to. Obviously, you should intend to buy that, but if you don't want to buy it, you don't have to buy it. With an EDC, you are definitely buying that property. Now, most people, when they buy a property, they'll exchange on a Friday, they'll have a week's delay, and then a week later, they'll complete. And that's because once they've exchanged contracts, your solicitor will draw down the money from the mortgage company, get your deposit, got everything together to buy the property the following week. You can actually do a simultaneous exchange and completion. If you let the solicitor know, they'll draw the money down before you actually buy it and do that on the same day. Or you can have this delayed completion. You exchange, and actually you can complete in a couple of months, a couple of years if that's what you want. and you might get permission to use that property in the meantime. So a great way of using it is, a lot of people, they find a property that needs renovating. So they buy a property, they spend the money renovating, they can't rent it out, they've got costs during that time. Then after 6 months, they can refinance it to get back the money they've spent on the deposit and also the renovation. And that's fine, that works. But there's a better way. What about if you exchange contracts, you put down a deposit? Typically it's 10%, but it doesn't have to be. It could be 1% or anything that you and the seller agree. It wouldn't be more than 10%. But you put down a deposit, you then spend the money doing the work. And then once you've added value to the property, you can actually buy the property at the higher value, which means that you often don't have to put a deposit into the property, okay? It's a little bit more a creative strategy, but I want to just raise your awareness of it. And then finally, I want to talk about vendor finance. Now, this is where someone's selling a property, the vendor, the seller, they're selling a property, but they don't need all the money. Like the person who was prepared to do an option, they didn't need all the money right now, they were prepared to wait. This particular person, they don't want to wait, they want to get the sale done. So maybe a property's worth 200,000, you might buy at the full price, the 200,000, but they will lend you the deposit to buy that property. Now, it needs to be done in the correct way. We need to make sure that anything that needs to be declared to lenders is declared to lenders. Otherwise, that's called mortgage fraud. You don't want to do that. So there are certain ways you need to do this properly and carefully. Most mortgage companies would not like that because they want to see you putting some money into it. They want to see some skin in the game. The problem is if you put 25% deposits into every property you buy, no matter how much money you have, at some point you will run out of your own funds. That's why we use creative strategies such as PLOs, EDC and vendor finance, which means we can buy more property. There are some other creative things you do, like you could joint venture with the owner. Let's say you find a property that needs developing, adding value. Rather than you buying that and spending the money doing it, you get the owner to put the property in, you bring the money in to do the work, which by the way, you can borrow from someone else. The work's finished off, you then sell or refinance the property. Again, you're getting some profit share from this using very little of your own money. It's about opening your mind to understand there are lots of different ways of financing deals. They don't all have to be done in the conventional way of putting in a big deposit and getting a mortgage. So I've got some online training all about this, goes into a bit more detail about some of these strategies, and I love to give that to you as a gift. All you have to do is click on the link below in the description, come and register for that online training, and I've got a lot more time to go through each of these strategies in detail and explain when are the circumstances right for those particular deals. And so come and register for that training, and I'd love to give you more information on how you can use creative finance to buy and control a lot more property than you might be doing right now. Hopefully you've liked this video. Please click the like, click on the bell icon to make sure you get alerted to videos, and also why not subscribe to the channel. We have new videos coming out every single week. If you subscribe, you're not going to miss some of this valuable content. And go and watch some of the other videos. I've got a lot of information we're giving out for free. That's my gift to you to help you become a more successful investor. So as ever, I'd encourage you to invest with knowledge, invest with skill. Thanks for watching.